Welcome. So good to be with you on this Wednesday as we get together for a little midweek Bible study and devotional time. So glad that you've taken some time out of your week, out of your day to join us to dig into God's word and hopefully be uplifted and encouraged and challenged by what he has to say to us. And I'm so glad that you've joined us today to do just that. Have you ever been homesick? Probably when you were younger, a little bit more than maybe now, but even still, we can experience those things. Maybe when you were younger, you went to summer camp for the first time, or went away to spend the night at somebody's house for an extended period of time, or maybe you took a trip to a foreign country as you got a little bit older. Maybe you moved away from home to go to college or something along those lines, or maybe as after college, you grew up, you moved away from family and friends that you had previously lived around, and you moved to a new place where you maybe didn't know anybody at all, or maybe you just knew a few people, whatever it may be, just those new phases in life where you're away from home and what you had previously known for much of your life. And during those times, it's easy to feel sad and maybe a little bit lonely at times and down and to long to be back with what is familiar, right? And what is not just, I guess, familiar, but long to be back, more so not with what, but who, right? And with family and friends and loved ones, and to enjoy the comforts of home and the pleasures of home and those people that we're used to being around. And I think that's a natural response, right, to being away from home for a long period of time. I even sometimes experience that when I'm just on vacation, just for a short period of time. But as Christians, I think this is some of what we feel, or at least we ought to feel, right, for our heavenly home and about our heavenly home as well. There are times in life, oftentimes in our lives, when we do wish to be home. We wish to be away from some of these things that we experience in this life, and to experience our real home that God ultimately has designed us and created us to be in with Him forever. Now, that doesn't mean, I want to be clear, that doesn't mean we have a death wish or anything like that, but rather it's this longing that we have for completeness and fullness and wholeness, and for everything to be as God ultimately intended it to be, again, where he ultimately and created us and designed us to be. And so Paul says this in Ephesians chapter 2, and he talks about our citizenship, how it's in heaven, and it's not in this world, but it's in heaven. It's in the next world. And so he says this in Ephesians chapter 2. He says, "So now you are no longer strangers and foreigners," because that's what we are here. We are strangers and foreigners in this world. But you, Paul says, you are citizens along with all of God's holy people. That's where our citizenship is. And you are members of God's family, or God's household. I love that language that Paul says. You see, while the only life we have ever known is life on this earth, the reality is that this world and this earth, at least as it currently is, we'll have to talk about how God's going to create a new heaven, a new earth. We'll talk about the fullness of that at a different time. But this world, as it currently is not our home. Our life on this earth is maybe similar to like a wilderness camping trip, right? It certainly may have some enjoyable parts, but it's uncomfortable for the most part, and it's dirty, and most importantly, it is temporary. We spend time on earth for a little while, but our ultimate home is with God in a new heaven and a new earth. And if we are truly citizens of heaven, and ultimately what is to be heaven, shouldn't we act like it, right? I mean, and knowing that we are children of God and that this world is not our home, it's not our ultimate home, shouldn't that change our perspective on life, right? Things that would maybe normally bother people don't have to bother us, because we know that this life is not forever. Things that this world says are important, like status and money and stuff, and a great many other things, aren't as important to us, because those things don't really matter in view of eternity. And things that maybe aren't as important to this world and to people at times, like serving and giving and how we treat people and our morals and our values and so many other things that God says ought to be important, are more important to us, because those things do matter in view of eternity. A little over a decade ago, it seems like, I don't know, longer or shorter, but there was a popular catchphrase or term that was coined back in, I think it was like 2012, when this first started circulating wildly. But the term is YOLO. YOLO. It's often said YOLO, but YOLO, which literally meant You only live once. YOLO, you only live once. And the idea being that you only get one life, right? And this life is all there is, and so you better go enjoy it as much as you can. Do whatever makes you happy, do it because you only live once, right? And that's obviously, while that phrase is no longer used as much, we that sentiment is still very strong in our culture and in our world. And listen, to a certain extent, I get the sentiment. The reality is that you do need to take advantage and live, as best you can for the life that you have in this life. But the mantra in and of itself simply isn't true. This life is not all we have. There is life beyond this life. Now, that's not to say that we should waste our life, right? That's absolutely not the case. We absolutely should not waste this life. In fact, our view of eternity shapes even more how we live this life. Perhaps, but perhaps we don't need to get so caught up in living for this world and for the things of this world. When we view this world, this life, as temporary, the pains, the troubles, the trends, the petty issues, a whole host of other things in this life seem much less important in relation to living and loving like Jesus and to what awaits us in the next life with Him. And I hope we remember that as we live this life looking forward to the next. Hope you have a blessed day. God bless.